Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you and welcome to the workshop on improving your FLC award submission. This workshop, while the slide says Mid-Atlantic region, is open to all FLC members, and it's my understanding we have participants across all the regions, and so we welcome you all to today's workshop. First slide, please. Today's workshop, just as an overview, will have several speakers, and the agenda includes an overview of the FLC awards themselves. Our speakers have a vast amount of experience in the FLC award process, and they're going to share their experience with everyone today, from submitting themselves. They've been successful in receiving awards. They've been successful in judging awards and being part of the judging process, and can provide some tips for everyone in preparing their submission and at least making a serious attempt at being successful in your submission process. The presentations will go first, and then we will have lots of time for folks to ask questions and to get answers to many of your questions, and then we'll have some concluding thoughts and takeaways. Next slide. So for introducing our speakers today, first we have Sabra L, who I will let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what lab she works for and what her job is and her role in FLC.
Thank you, Claudia. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabra L. I am an attorney for the Headquarters Air Force Research Laboratory located at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio. I am also the Midwest Regional Coordinator for the Federal Laboratory Consortium, as well as the chair of the Department of Defense Technology Transfer Professional Development Working Group. So some of you may have seen me introducing panelists for our DoD Tech Transfer Virtual Training Series. So today I'm with you in a wearing a different hat as a panelist and looking forward to sharing my thoughts on judging the FLC Awards. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sabra. I'm sorry I mispronounced your name.
That's okay.
Next we have Jon Eisemann. And Jon, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in FLC and your lab you work for?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Claudia. Thank you. So welcome to this seminar. My name's Jon Eisemann, and I am the regional coordinator for the Mid-Continent region for FLC. I've been in that role for, I don't know, close to 2 years now. I was deputy prior to that. I've submitted a number of awards, nominations, some successful, most successful, some not. I work with the U.S. Department of Agriculture at the National Wildlife Research Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I am the Technology Transfer Program Manager, and I manage a technology transfers program staff of myself. So rather small unit, but I'm excited to talk to everybody about this because I think the awards program is one of the best ways as a technology transfer coordinator to promote my job within my organization. And so I don't have the crystal ball, but I've got some tips of the trade a little bit later. Thanks.
Thanks, Jon. So the next is we have David Kistin. David?
Hi, I'm David Kistin. So I work at Sandia National Laboratories. We're a DOE lab in Albuquerque, New Mexico and Livermore, California. And I'm part of a team that is one component of our tech transfer group. So we're part of an integrated partnerships organization. We've been very active with the FLC Awards, for the regions and for the national for a number of years. And so, have some perspective on I think, submitting awards, reviewing awards. Like Jon said, this has been a really great program for us, and I think it's a good way to bring visibility to all the good work that's happening around the country.
Thanks, David. Next, we have Michelle Newton.
Hi, my name is Michelle Newton. I'm a marketing communications specialist with the National Cancer Institute's Technology Transfer Center. I became involved with the FLC Awards in 2014. And as with any project, when you have the opportunity to stay with it for several years, you learn lots of things. And I'm looking forward to imparting some of those lessons learned and best practices with you today.
Thanks, Michelle. And last but not least, my colleague, Tom Stackhouse.
Thanks, Claudia, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and hope you learn lots from what we have to say. My name is Tom Stackhouse. I am the director of the Technology Transfer Center at the National Cancer Institute, which is part of the NIH. My background is that I've been working with FLC now for probably over 15 years in various roles. I've been on the executive board. I've also been on various committees, education and training committee, also been involved in the awards in terms of certainly been involved in writing several and obtaining awards from FLC, both at the national and at the Mid-Atlantic region. Also been a judge for some of the awards. And so I hope to impart to you a little bit of history. And Michelle and I will be sort of tag teaming our little section of the panel today. And I'll give you a little bit of history of how I came into the awards. I might give you some perspective of where the awards came from. And then Michelle will give you a lot more information with really good tips on how to write a good award. So thanks for joining us again.
So I failed to introduce myself. I'm Claudia Haywood. I am the Mid-Atlantic Regional Deputy Coordinator. I work for the Frederick National Lab for Cancer Research. I'm the Director of Intellectual Property and Strategic Agreements, and I will be moderating the panel discussion today. So can I have the next slide? So just a brief overview of the FLC Awards. And as I mentioned, I think some of the panel members have some vast experience with this. I've been with the National Lab for about 10 years and have worked with FLC pretty much the entire time. The FLC Awards themselves really are established to recognize the federal laboratories and the industry and partners in academia and state and local governments that work with the national laboratories in technology transfer achievements and in the scientific achievements that happen in the laboratories. The awards really recognize the creativity, the dedication, as well as the innovation of the federal scientists, the inventors, and our colleagues who are working in the field of tech transfer as professionals. As most of you know, the inaugural awards were actually started in 1984, and there were 5 major categories at that time, but now there are actually 12 major categories for the national awards, and most regions have about 5 or 6 categories. Some have different categories and additional categories based on their region, but each region has its own set of awards that it gives out as part of its regional meetings every year. The national awards are given out at the national meeting, and that's already happened for 2021. You can see who received national awards on the FLC website, which is a good resource for information about submitting an award and who has received past awards. There's information about all the past recipients of national awards. And you can also, if you need additional information about submitting awards, you can contact the FLC and we will provide you with information there as well on how to contact the FLC as part of your question and answer session. Next slide. So, award submission. Again, national awards, that's part of the process. That happens in advance of the national meeting. It's already happened for 2021. There are multiple categories for regional awards, and in Mid-Atlantic, we have the following categories: Excellence in Tech Transfer, Laboratory Director Award, the Interagency Partnership Award. We also have Outstanding Technology Transfer Professional Award, Service Awards, and Rookie Awards. And these are primarily established to reward professionals and our colleagues who are working in the field. I think these are great awards for recognizing new professionals in the field, encouraging them in their development in tech transfer. I myself and a number of our colleagues here on this panel have been doing this for a while, and so we've been mentors to others. We probably started out as mentees to folks who are no longer, in the field, have retired. And this is a good way to encourage people to continue to develop in the tech transfer field. We also have the State and Local Economic Development Award. As many of you know, that strategic relationships with our state and local economic development partners is a critical part of technology transfer, and especially if the National Lab is working with startup companies and organizations and trying to get funding. And then, of course, there's educational institutions and federal laboratory partnership awards in the Mid-Atlantic region. And as I mentioned, Mid-Atlantic region categories are not unique. Most of the other regions have very similar categories. And if you go out to the FLC website page, you can look at the regional page and see what the deadlines are for the awards that are coming up based on their meetings and the categories in which you can submit for awards for this year. And again, information about award submission process is on the FLC website, and part of our responsibility as the regional deputy coordinators for each region is to ensure that we get the awards process out to the membership, and we work with the national folks who are in charge of the awards to make sure that's done. Next slide. So next we're going to have the speakers' presentations, and John Eisemann is going to kick us off with his vast amount of experience and talk about areas that he's worked in the past in terms of getting the award submission together. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Michelle. I'm excited, like I said in my introduction, I'm excited about this talk because I find this program to be incredibly useful within my lab, and I think other people should take advantage of it. I'm going to use the Mid-Continent region in a couple slides just to highlight some of the things that I think should be looked at as you consider awards, but they're appropriate to any of the regions. It doesn't matter whether I talk about mine or the others. So if I could get the first slide, I'll jump right into it. So, you know, my first tip is take a look at what your region has to offer in terms of awards. In our particular region, David, I don't know if David has said this, but he is my deputy regional coordinator. And as deputy, he runs our awards program. But you know, take a look at what your particular region has to offer in terms of awards and then go through the types of work you've been doing for the last year, 2 years to see what might fit that. You know, we have awards just like other regions in excellence in technology transfer. We've got a partnership award, state and local development award, outstanding technology transfer professional of the year from a regional basis. We have one award that I think is kind of unique and I really like it. It was brought on before I became coordinator, but that's the Notable Technology Award. And then we recognize a regional lab as well. So I would guess that as you think about writing some award submissions, things that you're doing day to day or over the course of many months would probably fit in one, if not more, of these categories. You know, I like the Notable Technology Transfer Award within our region because it's not really a success story. It's really about, you know, it's not really about a technology transfer success story, but it's really about giving some recognition to the scientists or teams of scientists that are just working on a cool technology. And so it's really geared towards award, you know, providing some recognition to the scientists themselves. You know, another thing that I like and I find very useful within my region and within my laboratories is a partnership award, and that's not really a state and local and economic development award. It's really about the partners themselves, and we use that award to provide some recognition to the partners. And so when you think about what types of things you might nominate within your particular laboratory or your sphere, don't just think about your scientists or the activities you do, but think about the partners that you work with. It doesn't have to be this old, you know, this grandiose project where you've sent somebody to the moon. Small steps can make big differences. And so I'll tell you, the partners love the recognition. So the only reason I put our awards up there is not to promote our awards, but just to highlight that there's all kinds of different categories that you can nominate things for. Can I go to the next slide, please? So what we've done in our particular region is we've tried to make the nomination process simpler, and that is we've harmonized our award submission process to match the national submission process in 3 categories. And you can see what these categories are right here. So to help you as a technology transfer coordinator work with your nominations and relieve some of the burden of writing them, because it is work, in these particular categories, our labs representatives can submit 1 award nomination. It'll be considered at both regional and national. You won't have to rewrite it. So can I go to the next slide, please? So here's my first big tip. Follow the directions. The directions are there for a reason. There's a lot of thought behind writing those directions, and it certainly gives you the idea of what the review panel is looking for. If the directions say no more than 2 pages, don't write 2 pages and 3 lines. Write it on 2 pages because that's what they asked for. Don't write 4 pages because the reviewers are probably going to be a little ticked by that. And in the directions, it tells you exactly what they're looking for in each of those questions or those categories you need to provide a narrative to. And answer those in that particular block. Don't spread the answers for that block through all the different parts of the nomination. Answer that question right there. It makes it way easier for the reviewer who's looking at perhaps 30 of these things. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm sorry. This just kind of gets to that, what I was just talking about, and that is, explain your technology. This is for 1 award in our region, and I'm just using it as an example. First question is explain your technology. Well, that's where you explain the technology. You don't need to talk about all the other aspects of it. You explain the technology. And what is this going to be used for? Well, speculate that, put on your thinking cap. What else can this be used for besides making, super fine measurements of atomic motion? What else can it be used for? Were there any partnerships? Were there any patents filed? When I look at this particular award category, I want to see the answers to these questions in the nomination, where I expect to see them. Next slide. Okay, this gets at an earlier comment, but you don't have to write a book to really describe the beauty of what it is you're nominating. As a reviewer, I appreciate brevity because, like I said, I might have to look at 30 of these things. I'm busy, just like everybody else is. I appreciate concise writing, and but definitely, enough to convey your message. So, but don't make it too long. Stick within the directions. Next slide. So the other thing is you are, in this respect, you are the champion of your laboratory. You're the superhero. You are identifying the nominations that you think are worthy of nominating for an award. And I'll tell you, the people that you nominate, even if they don't win, they're super psyched that you would even consider nominating for them for that award. So, toot their horn, toot your horn, whoever it happens to be. Don't hold back. Don't over glamorize what it is you have, because that shows through. But don't be afraid to be the superhero for your particular technology. Next slide. And I think this is my last slide, and this is the most important part, is just take the time to do it. It is work. It's incredibly rewarding for not just you, especially if you win, but not just for you, but for the recipients of the award. It's a big deal. And I get so much mileage out of the FLC Awards within my organization that, last year I submitted Laboratory of the Director of the Year, and my director won. And I tell you what, he was flying high. So anyway, so the mileage you get is awesome at all levels. So take the time to sit down and do it. both national and regional. And I think that's my last slide. So those are my four takeaways. Is there another slide?
Thanks, John. That
Yep.
was really great, and it's a great segue to Michelle and to Tom, so I appreciate that. Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Actually, I think, Tom, did you want to preface this? Tom, I can't hear you.
Sorry, they're in different places. Okay, sorry about that. So John, you gave me a great entrance into what I wanted to say here, and that's the excitement that just generated by giving an award. Who doesn't like to receive an award, right? I mean, it's just a generally good feeling kind of thing. And so I kind of wanted to just give you a little bit of history of how I kind of stepped into this before Michelle goes into a little more detail about how to write a really solid submission. So for us at NCI, I went to my first national FLC meeting back, I think it was in the early 2000, 2005, 2004, and I attended their award ceremony. And I was so impressed. I mean, at that point, they were wearing tails. It was a very formal process that they gave the awards out. The inventors were there, the tech transfer people were there. And I was very impressed with how the award ceremony went about, and I saw how it brought together the inventors and the scientists along with the tech transfer specialists. And so I was really impressed with that. Went back to my office and said, we have got to get engaged in this. And so we began the process of preparing our own nominations, and it took a while to kind of get that up and going. It was a somewhat arduous process at the time, and we were just learning it. And then I'm also at the same time learning about FLC. So I learned about the regionals and how the regionals also have award categories. And so we began to engage in writing these. And like I said, it took a fair amount of effort, involved several different people across the different laboratories here. But I can tell you that as we did it and we began to receive awards and they began to see the benefit of them, as John was mentioning, when you're standing on the stage receiving an award with your PI, or your PI is getting an award for whatever the category is, it is really well worth it. Not only does it give everybody a pat on the back and make everybody feel good, to me, what it showed was it was an opportunity to help develop a team atmosphere with your investigators, right? So to me, that is critical for us in tech transfer, and is the theme that I have pushed in the office, is to be able to develop an opportunity to collaborate closely with your investigators. And this receiving an award together with your investigators is just one fantastic way of doing that. Now, Michelle came on board, as she said, I believe in 2014, and she has just done a tremendous effort in organizing us. And something that I thought was a little helter-skelter and all over the place, she pulled it all together. She worked with the award folks at the FLC. She learned more about it, and she has developed a system now that really has streamlined how we go about this. So I just want to point out that, you know, there's a lot of opportunity to benefit from this for you and for your leadership, for your scientific folks to come together. Be aware that every one of these awards, and I think this will probably be discussed coming up on some of the other people, every department or every federal agency has a different technology that's going forward. So you want to be really clear for those who are judging in the awards, right? So be really clear and simple in the awards. And I think John mentioned that it's, you know, it's not that difficult to do it. It takes time, but you can do that and keep it simple. And so I think Michelle will bring some of that out. I'm going to turn it over to her, and she can walk through her slides and give you a sense of how we are doing it here at the NCI under Michelle's leadership. Go ahead, Michelle.
All right, well, thank you so much, Tom and John. I think you teed up perfectly some of the tips that I'm ready to share. So if you want to go to the next slide. So based on, as I mentioned, years of being involved in the process, a lesson learned is to really focus on gleaning topics throughout the year, potential topics, really understanding the award criteria, and then taking the time to select the best candidates to move forward before beginning the nomination. So we had some instances where we went down the path of putting together an award nomination, and we expended a great deal of time only to hit a certain point where we realized that the award really wasn't ready to go through. And that was a time sink. It also kind of took some time and attention away from other awards that we were working on. So we really take some time now to vet the candidates that we're going to put forward and make sure that they're ready to put forward. And I think another key element of success is communicating and promoting the value of these awards to our staff. It's really important that we have them on board and we engage with them. They're our partners in putting these nominations together. And I think Tom in particular does a really good job of helping to just communicate the value of these awards within our tech transfer group and with our scientific partners. So next slide. So understanding the keys to execute is really important, and it all starts with a plan. It's important to create a project timeline and then to decide, who will draft the nomination, who will be involved in that process. In our case, we identify a technology transfer person for the nomination to work with me. So unlike John, we have a rather large technology transfer staff, and I work with that key person to really put together a draft of that nomination. Another key element of our planning process is to identify all the nominees up front. Cancer technology, as you can imagine, is complex. It has a long developmental timeline. And so it takes a lot of investigation to really uncover the story and to identify the nominees. Next slide. So in understanding the steps to execute and building your timeline, don't discount the need to include time to solicit feedback and to revise your nomination. We also, as part of the process, and I think it says it right there on the form, all of the nominees need a chance to review the nomination, and many provide feedback. And when you're dealing with sharing these nominations with outside companies, you really have to be mindful of giving them enough time to be able to review the awards. And then don't discount the time that it actually takes to transfer all of this great information that you've collected for your nomination and put it into the FLC online form. It's a time-consuming process. And then a tip that I would suggest is to include a non-subject matter expert as part of your team. So in this case, I'm the non-scientist in our group, and I think it's really helpful for us. As I mentioned, we're dealing with really complex technology, and it can be challenging to translate that type of information into an award that can be easily understood by a non-scientific audience. And I think having someone like myself involved that is positioned to do that is an asset to the process. Next slide. And so I have a checklist here of some useful information. I would suggest, in our case, we ask ourselves, will a reviewer without a science background be able to easily understand the nomination? Are the answers easy for a judge to find? Are the questions completely answered? One thing I would suggest is to write like Hemingway. So to use clear, concise writing, to remove extra words that kind of complicate the picture, and then to make use of things like bullets and headlines. Just make it really easy for the judges to be able to find the answers, and strive to make it an enjoyable experience for the judges to read your nomination. Ask yourself, does the nomination communicate excellence? And then an administrative task, but when you have multiple reviewers, is the award within word count? So to give you an example, we had a nomination that we put forward about a cancer technology that was absolutely revolutionary. And we put it forward for a Mid-Atlantic award, and it did not win. I mean, this was a technology that, truly has changed cancer research. And the reason it didn't win is it was poorly written. Someone without a science background really just they didn't get the point that this technology had the potential to really change how we go about developing cancer drugs. And so we revised the nomination, and it deservedly won at the national award level. So that's, I think, a really good example of, just making sure that it clearly communicates the excellence, that it's understandable to a lay audience, and we take the time to, remove extra information that doesn't directly answer questions. Next slide. So thank you. Those are my key points.
Thank you, Michelle. So I think we have David next. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, thanks, Claudia. So a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about have already been mentioned by the folks, but it's good. I think that there's a lot of perspective throughout the process that we all see, because a lot of us are involved in different stages of this. But I'm going to talk about really just some tips from the reviewer's perspective. So I reached out to some of the folks that have done reviews. So thank you very much to Linda and Ellen for your input on this. Just for some advice that they've imparted from their experience on review panels, organizing review panels. And I've been a reviewer myself, and so a lot of this resonates. I think the first major thing, and this is echoing something Michelle talked about, the nominations are about tech transfer and not just about technology. So making sure you're explaining what your nomination is in terms that non-scientists can understand is really important. And so not just we sign the license, right? I love the tip of having a non-subject matter expert as part of the writing review. This helps with the cursive knowledge, that thing where we sort of just assume that other people have the background to understand what we're talking about. And if you spend so much time with this technology and, with these stories, you can become sort of numb to the fact that most of this is really, really technical, right? And so you want to be able to communicate it quickly. The second big thing that they talked about was being thorough. So making sure that you read the criteria really carefully, answer all the parts of the questions. Sometimes awards come down to, just a few points. So if you miss out on some of this, you might be missing out on an award. The third big thing here is that formatting really matters. The judges are reading a lot of nominations. John mentioned this, right? If you're reading 30 nominations, anything that you can do to make it easier for the judges is a plus. So make sure that the font, the line spacing, any special formatting like bolds or bullet points show up before you submit. So you can print out a PDF of your nomination before you hit the submit button to see what it looks like, make changes if needed. This seems, self-explanatory, but it actually helps a lot. So we have a team that submits our nominations, and they go through this every time, right? And it helps. Finally, under this point, follow the instructions about how to upload. So example here, don't upload directly from Word. Paste your text into something like Notepad first, then copy and upload. The formatting won't always work well, and it results in a nomination that's really difficult to read. So just take time there, which is kind of leading into the next point they made. Give yourself and your partners time, and don't be shy when you're reaching out to people. So this is something that we've also touched on. John mentioned this. It's really important to make sure that your researchers, the managers, licensing and creative people, partners from companies and other labs or universities are on board, and they understand that they're going to have to provide information and answer the nomination questions. So we have come across this a lot where we have these great ideas, these good nominations, but we get right up to the wire and you start to reach out to these companies and to other people, and you just don't get a response in the time that you need. And so great stories don't get told. Great, nominations don't get submitted. As part of this, keep in mind, this is not a fictional story, right? This is an accounting of tech transfer success. So, you want to tell people about those deadlines and requirements early and often, and, it helps to not be shy, right? Bug people and just kind of put that out there, right? You want to recognize this great work, but, there's a long process here. This is a chance to shine and tell people about all the wonderful things that they've accomplished. So typically, I think the response is positive, but it's less positive if they have 48 hours to turn this around. I think the last big thing from our reviewers was, just keeping in mind that you're telling a story, and just because this is technical doesn't mean that it can't be interesting. So as much as you can include about how people persevered, how people were creative or came up with new ways to do something, we find that that has resulted in successful nominations, right? So stories are important, right? And sometimes better to illustrate the success than just straight metrics. Metrics are important, impact's important, but if you can tell that story in a creative way, that I think a lot of times has a bigger impact for the reviewers, many of whom are not going to be subject matter experts in whatever the technology area is that you're submitting. So that is important to keep in mind. There's no way to get a panel that has deep subject matter expertise on every nomination. So that's really it. Those were the big ones. So be thorough. Keep in mind that this is about tech transfer, not just technology. Pay attention to formatting. Give yourself time and tell a story.
Thanks, David. I already have quite a few questions. I'll be asking you. I'm just letting you know. All right, so next we have Sabra. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So I have been a national FLC Awards judge. I've been a regional, the Midwest Regional Awards judge. I have also been a national FLC Award nominee. So I have helped draft the awards nominations and then also been on the other side of that as a judge. But today I'm going to talk to you from the judge's perspective. I'm going to echo and foot stomp many of the tips my colleagues have already shared with you, but are very important. So the FLC Awards program can help tell your tech transfer story of and for your laboratory and highlight the accomplishments of your laboratory. So the awards program helps you do that, but drafting a phenomenal awards submission so that you win that award so you can help tell that story for your laboratory is important. Next slide, please. Okay, so tell your story. What is unique about your tech transfer success story? So for example, the FLC Awards judges review by award category. So as some of my colleagues have already stated, we are reviewing dozens of award nominations by category. And in all honesty, some of the nominations start to read the same. They start to sound the same. You might have the most amazing technology transfer story in the nation. However, if your story starts to sound like every other award nomination because we're reviewing dozens of these at a time, you need to be unique and stand out. Okay, so follow directions. I think the attendees, you've heard this a lot today, so there must be something to this. And I will just add here, read the call of the question and answer the call of the question as clearly and succinctly as you can, and stay within the call of the question. That is what we're asking when we're asking you to follow the directions. Another tip along those lines of following directions is, so I remember in law school, taking law school exams, my law school professors, we'd ask for tips because, you know, they're reading hundreds of law school exams, and all the law school exams have the same call of the question, right? So all the answers start to sound the same. And law school professors would say, I don't want your exam answer to make me stop reading. And I didn't really understand that until after I'd taken a few exams. And when I finally understood that, that meant when you're reading an answer, you don't want to stop reading and go, what am I reading? This has nothing to do with what I asked the student to answer. Okay, so similarly, here with award submissions, I don't want to stop reading when I'm reading your nomination and go, what am I reading? This has nothing to do with the question that was asked. This award nomination is not in the right category. And I'll tell you, it's really frustrating because you want to give points and you want to award winners who should be recognized. But sometimes when you are reviewing dozens of these award nominations, you just start taking points off for not following directions, because you have to rack and stack somehow, because they all start sounding the same, and the submitters aren't following directions. So you have to take points away somewhere. So reiterate the follow directions. So be clear and concise, not overly technical. Some of my colleagues have already stated this. FLC Awards judges are from across the federal government, right? And we have very diverse backgrounds, meaning not everyone who's reviewing your award submission has a technical background. And so, reiterate again, you can be technical, but you can write your award submission in such a way that someone without a technical background would understand the importance and impact of your technology transfer. Also along those lines, the judges, the FLC Awards judges, we're volunteering our time to review your award submissions. So, and that's a lot of extra time when we're reviewing dozens and dozens of, especially at the national level, award nominations. So we want to enjoy reading these because we get to find out what's going on across the country in technology transfer. And so these can be very exciting to read. But again, reminder, we're volunteers, and so this is an extra duty that we've taken on, and we want to be excited about reading your nomination. So again, be clear and concise, but not overly technical. Okay, last point. Don't wait until the last minute to draft your submission. We can tell. Take the time to be thorough and to write it well, and it shows in the award nomination package. So take that time. It is a lot, and having been on the side of drafting nominations and submitting and understanding that this is something extra that most of us are all doing in submitting these award nominations. It is a lot of extra time and energy, but get the right people around you to help you draft that award nomination package, and it will come together, and it will come together well. So those are my tips. That's all I have. Thank you.
Sabra, thank you so much for that. And it's a great lead in to a question that I have that I'm going to toss in, but I'm going to open it up so that folks who have questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and Sean's going to help me out with gathering those questions from participants. But I am going to open it up to the entire panel for this first question. Everybody has talked about, and Michelle really hit on, planning. And Sabra talked about it as well. What do you guys think is a reasonable planning timeline for a winning submission? And, you know, I'd like to hear everybody's thoughts because I think all of you have been judges and have been submittees. So what do you think? And I'll start with Michelle, and then we'll just kind of go around and everybody give me what you're thinking.
So I do think that I would encourage people to make it a year-long planning process. So gather those stories, make note of stories throughout the entire year. But when you actually reach out to start to identify topics and select those, I think that process, at least for us, with, you know, given our technologies, it's a good like four-month process. The time to vet technologies, to vet the stories, to make sure that, you know, these are the submissions that we'd like to put forward, and then beginning your actual drafts. In my experience, it's about a 4-month process.
Don, what do you think?
So I'm a little bit different than Michelle. You know, I have 30 scientists that report to, you know, that work in our laboratory. So the scope of ideas for nominations is much smaller than perhaps somebody. I heard one of the DoD science tech transfer coordinators a while back tell me they had 32,000 scientists to draw from. Well, I got 30. So it's what I find is I work really closely with our public affairs person, and she's on site and she's excellent at helping with this. But I would say, you know, we start kicking around ideas about a month ahead of time, and we try to have a draft ready 2 weeks ahead of time, and then so we can get back and forth to our scientists. And most of the time we're pretty close to the deadline when we submit, which I'm not recommending, but I'm just telling you what happens in my lab. So it's you know, some years I don't think like last year I didn't nominate because I didn't really think I had a technology or a story that was ready to tell. I've got some on the horizon that I'm dying to nominate, but they're not ready. And so last year I selected, you know, I chose not to. This year I know our awards process is open right now. I've selected our you know, for the region, I've selected our story for this year, and I will probably start writing it as soon as this webinar is over because it'll have charged me up. So that's where I'm at.
Sabra, what are you thinking?
So I really think it depends on the award. Some of the awards, especially the awards that are people focused. So for example, the Rookie of the Year award, the director, lab director award, those awards, people have to be interviewed, right? So the person being nominated has to be interviewed. If someone's drafting that award nomination for them, which typically they are, especially lab directors, colleagues are interviewed, and then with actual technology transfer stories for those awards, scientists and engineers are interviewed, maybe the patent attorneys, the tech transfer professionals, the partners in the awards. So all of that takes time to line up. So I really think it depends on how organized your tech transfer office is and how much assistance you have, like from your public affairs team. And if you have a lot of assistance from your public affairs team in your particular office, then leverage that and use them because that's what they do for a living. They write for a living. So have them help you, see where they can help you in drafting your award nomination. And I would say no less than 6 weeks, no less than 6 weeks. And sometimes perhaps months to, you know, 12 weeks is probably an average to put a really good nomination together.
Thanks. I think some of the major points with that is that it's resource dependent and it's award dependent. So I think that's a good takeaway from that point. Another question that I had, and I'm hoping that Sean, if you're listening, that if there are questions from participants, please let me know. But I have another question about working with partners, because everybody knows that some of the awards involve working with partners. And I know from my own experience with preparing a submission, a really great submission that I thought was great at least, and involved a number of partners, a lot of extra time was necessary to involve the partners. The problem was, and I have a question for you guys, what I ran into with the partners was what information could and could not be included in the award submission. And I'm looking to hear from you guys if you've ever run into that type of, I hate to say impediment, but it was, and they were enthusiastic, but only to a point with the award submissions, because I think as an industry partner, they were less enthusiastic about sharing on a national scale that they were working with us at that level and the detailed amount of information. So how do you kind of deal with that issue in terms of gathering information from partners who may be less enthusiastic about the award as you are, when you're excited and your team's excited and probably your scientists are all excited about submitting for the award? Tom was nodding. I'm curious to hear what you think, Tom.
That's just the habit. No. Yeah, no, I think that is a challenge, and we have run into it, and I'm sure Michelle can even tell some stories about that. And I think it's really important, though, that for all of, not all of them, but the majority of the tech transfer awards are probably going to involve some kind of a partner, right? So your excellence in tech transfer are usually associated with a CRADA or a license, so that means there's an outside party, right? And so getting them engaged early on, so they are aware it's going to happen, and they can provide wording feedback. Like you said, they're sensitive to what you're actually putting out there publicly. So let them know clear up front what is going to be made public, right? And get their involvement in it as early as possible. And depending on who that is and the number of partners that it is, you need to plan the time in to do that. So it might not be just a 1 month turnaround time. You may need several months to go back and forth with the partner and with your internal folks to get it all coordinated together. Not unlike negotiating an agreement in some respects. So that's a timing that really is important, and that's where I think the idea of for us, we've gotten into it so much, and we have such a large pool because we're so big. We're probably up there in the tens of thousands potential staff working for NCI and our client institutes that we have a lot to pull from. So Michelle, one of the suggestions I was going to make was, if you are doing something else that is promoting your tech transfer office. So if you have a newsletter, for example, that you're putting out, which we do a quarterly newsletter that Michelle is involved in putting together, you can begin to draw those stories out. So people will submit their stories for the newsletter, and there you might have a story or something that's worth a nomination. And even though it might not be ready right at that moment, you've got it. You can start working on it. So you might not submit it for another year, but you can begin to work on it then. So kind of get that sort of rolling submission going, so you've always got some in the queue and some you're working on. I think that's a smart way to approach it, so you're not suddenly rushed at the last minute and trying to pull this information together.
Thanks. Sean, do we have any questions from participants? Because I do have one other question that I wanted to ask before we try to wrap up.
We do have about 3 questions from the audience as of now.
Okay, let's go ahead and start with those questions then.
All right. And the first question we have is, small tech transfer offices with only 1 or a few employees find it challenging and daunting to compete for awards with large tech transfer offices who often have marketing/communications folks drafting award submissions. Often it's the lone tech transfer person in a small office drafting an award submission in addition to all the other tech transfer job responsibilities. In recognition of this difference in available resources, will FLC consider offering an award category for small labs, sites, facilities?
That's a great question. I'm curious to hear what folks like Tom, who's at the national level, and Sabra and John think about that.
So I'll chime in on that because I'm from a very small lab, and I have not had that particular thought about creating a category specifically for small labs. I think it's something worth considering. But the way I look at it is even though these other larger organizations might have teams to work on something, I've got some pretty cool stories to tell, and they're unique. And that's what I really draw on is, I don't have a big staff to help me. It's just Gail and myself and whoever we're nominating. But we look at the uniqueness of what it is we're nominating. And granted, we've got a little bit of an edge because we deal with wildlife and people love wildlife. But that's the angle I take is what's unique about this? How does my lab contribute to a larger picture? And that's the kind of story that I try to tell is not just about the technology itself, but the uniqueness of it, and then how does it contribute to things in a larger, in the larger picture. And I think that as a small lab, that's really the only tool that I have found that has worked for me. Now, whether or not FLC creates a new category for small labs, you'd have to define what a small lab is, because I've been on a call where NASA has said, well, we're a small lab. Well, NASA sends things to the moon. I mean, you can't get much more glamorous than that. And it's hard to compete against. And I don't consider them a small lab because their budget is probably 4 orders of magnitude larger, 5 orders of magnitude larger than my laboratory. So I just have to capitalize on what I have and what's unique about our technologies.
Thanks, John. Sean, next question.
Could I add to that real quick?
Sure.
So I think there's 2 things, and one is I understand the small lab and the struggles that they have in putting into work. And I would say, don't go alone. Don't do it alone. Don't try to do the whole thing yourself. I mean, even in our office where we are fairly large, Michelle doesn't do it alone. She is reaching out for various experts to help, including the scientific staff and maybe even some of their administrative support staff that can help you put that award together. So don't do it alone. And I forgot what my other point was, so we can go on. But if it comes up, I'll mention it later.
Tom, I think that's a great point, though. Sean, let's take another question. I know we only have a few minutes left.
Sure. Next question is, we have been hearing about the story in quotations. What are the elements that make a good story?
David, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think, and this is kind of on the last question too. I mean, finding good stories, these should be legitimately interesting, right? We look at a lot of things that already exist. So this is good for big labs and small labs, right? So you're not reinventing the wheel every time, but we look at R&D 100 award nominations, press releases, news articles, any other published materials, backgrounds. A lot of these already include things that answer some of the nomination criteria. And sometimes it's just a marketing sheet or a journal article, but it shows you a couple things. One, that there's interest, right? And that there's someone thought this was important enough to put out there. So you have the PI interested, you have potentially partners interested. And then, we just keep in constant touch with the licensing, CRADA, business development teams. We have good relationships with researchers and managers, so they can tell us what they want to push out. I think this kind of addresses the issue too of working with partners and getting people on board. If you can make this easy, so sourcing other primary materials that don't require a whole lot of input, it generally means that this is something that for at least one party, right, there was some interest in getting this information out into the public domain. So, we try not to be overly prescriptive and force things when there's not a lot of interest, because we're not always the best in the tech transfer office. We're not always the best, evaluated what is interesting, right, or what's great. I think, let your PIs and let your partners tell you where they want to engage.
I think just to follow up on David a little bit, as he was talking, the thing that strikes me is the why. It's what problem is this solving, or what, it doesn't have to be a problem, but what's behind it? Why do we go down this path? what's the benefit of this technology? And to me, that's what really frames the story is, you know, if you want to call it utility, that's fine, but you know, what's the why? Because that sets the stage for the rest of your story.
John, that's a good point. So Sean and Beth, I know we're right at 3 o'clock. I don't know if we have time for additional questions, or should we go with conclusions and takeaways?
We've got one more question if you want to address it quickly.
Okay, let's go with
All
that.
right. Can you comment on the importance of providing sufficient justification for each person listed with the application?
Sabra, you've been a judge with that. What do you think?
So I think maybe I'm not entirely understanding the question, but there is, in most of the award nominations, who was involved and why, and that's really important because it indicates the partnership, if there is a partnership, and if that's part of the criteria of the award. So you need to understand, so for example, sometimes in award nominations, the submitters will just list people's names and titles, and that's nice to know that these people are listed and they have titles, but what was their involvement in the technology transfer story that you're trying to tell? So what was their role in that technology transfer story, and why are you including them in the nomination? That's really important to me when I'm reading a nomination. And then I think there's maybe this is what the person asking the question is meaning. There's also the aspect of the application where you have to indicate that yes, the person being nominated, is in this such and such a role, and that's just to verify that the person that you're nominating actually did the thing you're nominating them for. They're in that role, and it occurred within the years that the award nomination has to be nominated within the time limit. So it's just to verify that people are made aware of why they're being nominated, and have you told them, hopefully you have, that they're being nominated, and that they are who you say they are. So I don't know if that really answered the question, but
I think so. That helps, I think. We did have a question come in, but we're right at 3:02 based on what I'm seeing. I did want to give each panelist one opportunity to give a final concluding sentence or two takeaway, and then I'll give a conclusion at the very end. So let's start with Sabra.
Continue to submit your nominations, and we look forward to reviewing your nominations. And it is really the awards is a wonderful aspect of the Federal Laboratory Consortium, and it's really exciting, inspiring to see the work that is going on in technology transfer across the country. So thank you, and thank you for that work and for your submissions.
David?
Yeah, I'd say, reach out for support, in your region. So the deputy coordinator, likely have gone through this and been a part of this in different ways. So if you have questions and if you want some advice, just reach out and see, if you can get some help, get some support. This is a great program. It's an honor for the individuals that are nominated for the lab. So, if you want some assistance as you're going through the process, just I think feel comfortable connecting with your coordinators.
Tom?
Yeah, so I would say just coordinate. Make sure that you're looking for things in advance. And I think we all work in labs that are doing some amazing things. So look for those stories and coordinate them early. And also as you're doing it, really think about the benefit, right? So if you haven't won an award, and you haven't submitted a nomination, do so and let that grab on, and then use that. Spread the word when you're an award winner, and you will get people coming to you saying, hey, I think this is worth an award nomination in the future. So it might be a little easier then for it to grow in your respective lab. So,
Michelle?
So a takeaway for me for today is I'm grateful for the judges sharing their feedback. In years past, I've really tried to seek out feedback about our awards and apply them. So it's kind of nice to see how it's matched up with a lot of the things that we're doing today. And I would just encourage judges to continue to share that feedback. I think it will really help people putting together the awards to produce better awards. It'll make it a more enjoyable experience for all of the judges. And it'll just help serve this larger goal of giving recognition to a lot of the great work that's taking place at the federal labs. So, thank you.
And John?
So I'm glad I got to go last, because I have the ultimate tip, and that is, if you want to know how to write an award for calendar year 22, not volunteer to be on a nomination review panel. And we will always welcome your participation, and you will learn more about what is a good and a bad, or not a bad, less good award if you have to sit and read them. And that's my number one tip, is get involved with FLC. Reviewing award nominations is incredibly rewarding personally, and it's a great way to get involved and learn how to write a better award next year. So that's my parting shot.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank all of the presenters and all the folks at FLC for helping out with the workshop today. My final takeaway is something that I think we could all take away from 2020 as a year, which was a year that had tons of challenges for all of us. That's just to understand that it's okay to brag. This is part of bragging, and bragging not only about your lab, it's bragging about your colleagues, it's bragging about your scientists, it could be bragging about the work that's going on in your own group, and it's okay to brag. We've been through a lot in the past 12, 18 months, and we need something to brag about, so feel free to submit. It's a good thing, and I think you should seriously consider it. We thank you all for your participation today, and we hope you will enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.